right, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the Holland Land Office guest speaker series featuring at Go Art. Had to extend our title now that we've had to move some because we're having some renovations done at the museum. So we're splitting our events between here at Go Art and the Richmond Memorial Library. But we're very excited to have a return presenter. I won't take us out of the experience, but we're going to go back to the Erie Canal with the Adventures of, I already forgot the name.
Aileen McGuire.
See, she'll tell you herself. So we're very excited to go back on the Erie Canal days here. Just a quick note. Thank you to Tompkins Community Bank for helping to support the guest speaker series this year, as well as Go Art, as we received a grant through their regrant program. So Go Art acknowledges that the land on which this project takes place is the ancestral territory of the Seneca Nation, one of the 6 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Go Art recognizes the historical and ongoing presence of Indigenous peoples in Western New York and honors their enduring relationship to this land. So Aileen, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.
All right.
Welcome.
Well, first of all, let me just give you a little bit of a setup for what I'm doing today. And I want to tell you, thank you very much for having me back again. This is a beautiful setting, too. Wow. But the other location is fabulous as well. So we're very lucky in the region to have all of these beautiful buildings to come to. So we're, for the preservationists, yay. The story that I'm going to be presenting actually began several years ago when my husband and I had a 1957 Richardson cruiser on the Erie Canal. And I loved it. It inspired me greatly to be just cruising down the canal at a slow speed. The engine was a little loud, but you know, some of my favorite moments, a little boy who was fishing, and he looked, I just had a Tuck Sawyer and Huck Finn moment, you know, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn moment, when I called out, "Did you catch anything?" And pulled up a line of fish and held it up, say, you know. So the people along the canal are so wonderful. The canal is a wonderful legacy for us. And it inspired me enough to start doing research. So history is the main topic around our household. My husband knows the names and dates, but I'm more of a cultural historian. That's what a teacher recently called me, and I love that title, cultural historian, because it marries all the things that I do, storytelling and singing and historical presentations and writing. So I've been working on this book. It's a collection of 10 stories about this girl who is fictitious. So I want you to know fictitious characters, fictitious experiences, but all based on the research that I did. And this is not a lecture. So I once did this program and the people were disappointed because they thought I was going to be doing a lecture. I want to let you know it's not a lecture. Dear Height. In the Irish, it means, may God be with you. My name is Aileen McGuire. I've traveled the country and the world over, but nothing warms my heart more than coming home. Buffalo was home port when I was a lass. I'm glad to see the Flight of 5 is still in operation, though it's undergoing construction. It's no surprise. The canal itself was built and rebuilt 3 times, you know. The first one was opened in 1825, but almost as soon as it was opened, they begun making it wider and deeper. And then the second one was finished in 1865. It was straighter than the original, but it followed mostly the same path. And that was the canal that I knew. The new canal, the barge canal, they call it. Well, it's fine for commerce, as the larger barges can use it. But if you ask me, it's missing something. It's got no heart. It's missing the Hoggees like me, with our mules and horses. We was the life of the canal. But not all progress is bad. The double locks made life easier and more profitable. My grandfather always said, time is money, and you can't be wasting it standing around, chewing fat and chawing tobacco, waiting for your turn in the lock. You know, sometimes we had to wait a day or two. So it made it faster and more profitable. Now, where should I begin to tell you about my experiences? It was long ago I was a girl, and though it's 1910 now, I still remember those days like they was yesterday. Me ma brung me over from the Green Isle, and oh, so green it was, though I didn't see it until many years later. I was just a babe in arms in 1851. We come over, and she said it took 3 months, and I was sick the whole way. We come to join me da, who was working the salt in Syracuse. But when he died 2 years later, Ma took me to Buffalo so she could be closer to her father, who worked on the water. I barely knew the man. We lived cross town in a tenement house in Black Rock, and he lived in the flats. This is what I was telling you about. The flats is not a place for ladies. I heard they had a hoochie dancer named Kitty O'Neill who danced naked on a pedestal. Well, I barely knew my grandfather because of how far he lived and where he lived. But in 1860, when the third wave of cholera come through the city, it took me ma. Before she passed, she made me grandfather promise to take care of me. There'll be no orphanage for me daughter, Micheline, or I'll come back and haunt you. And she would a too. I didn't even get to kiss her dear cheek. They burned everything we had, wrapped her in a white sheet, covered her in coal tar, and she's buried in the potter's field in Buffalo, in an unmarked grave. That's how I come to be living with a man I barely knew, on his boat, the Mary Rose, named for my sainted mother, on the Erie Canal. His crew was his friends, Finn and Sean O'Connor. Now, Finn was the finest navigator and steersman on the water, and you could ask anyone. Sean was the best cook, though you might call me partial. I remember the first day when I arrived at the boat. I was not sure that I wanted to be there, but then I seen my mother's name on the boat, and it would be like her rocking me to sleep at night. I tripped going over the plank to get on the boat. Almost fell in the drink right away. My grandfather said, Aileen, don't go jumping the bridges before you have your sea legs. I never knew what he meant, not until many years later. He looked me up one side and down the other, and he said to Sean, you better get the lass something to eat. She's as thin as a rail. And while you're at it, find her something more suitable to wear. As I come with only the dress on me back, and it weren't right for hopping on and off a boat all day long. Well, Sean, saint of a man that he is, he took me to one general store after the other until we found something in my size and something, he said, suited my smile. A pair of bib overalls, and I never wanted to wear a dress after that. But look at me now. Times change. But one thing that doesn't change, I have to get rid of my hat. And I have to get rid of my shoes. I hope you don't mind. That's so much better. Yes. Whew. If I had a choice, I'd be barefoot all the time. Now, where was I? Oh, he found me a pair of overalls, but I still had a problem with my hair. It was as red as my mother's and down my back. But when I come to the boat, I had no brush and I had no ma. Sean put it up in pigtails, but it still got tangled. And after only a few days, I took matters into my own hands. My hair was the only thing that I had any say over, because it was mine. And so I took up a kitchen knife and lopped the tails off at my ears. Well, my grandfather threw a fit. He said, "Aileen McGuire, I promised your sated mother I'd be raising you right, and there you are, looking like a ragamuffin boy." And he threatened to make me wear the pigtails tied to the side of my head. And he would have too. But then Finn reminded him short hair was better against head lice, and looking like a boy was safer among the rough men of the canal. I suppose I took to the water as if I'd been born to it, and in a way I was. I watched Grandfather and Finn as they drove the mules. Sometimes I would follow alongside Finn on the towpath, running to keep up with his long stride. And every now and then he'd let me drive the mules under his watchful eye, of course, and with his hands right there. I mucked the stalls. I fed and brushed the animals. I learned the lines and the knots. I helped Sean in the galley, peeling carrots and potatoes, fetching the water, banking the stove. Did I happen to tell you that when I come to the boat, I was 8 years old? Well, I did everything they asked, and Sean was teaching me to read. Now, they was glad I took an interest in becoming a Hoggee, which is a mule driver. As Finn and my grandfather had to do all the work, as Sean couldn't do that heavy work anymore, he had caught his foot between the boat and a lock wall and twisted it. So when I took an interest, they was happy about that. But I never did get to tail the mules by myself. I did everything else, but they wouldn't let me tail the mules because it's dangerous work. My grandfather always made sure someone else was at the backside. I remember this one horse thief. I called him Mushmelon because he had a little round head and his skin was orange. And I reckon his brain was made of mush because he took it in his head that he was going to steal our mules and got behind him. Well, I never knew a man could fly so far. Yes, talon the mules. You probably don't know much about that. I'll tell you about that. So boats usually had 1 or 2 teams, unless they were a larger boat, and then they might have 3. One team was always on the path while the other was below deck in the stables. We had summer and autumn as our morning team, and Susie and Jess for the afternoon. And they drove the graveyard shift if we happened to drive at night, which we didn't like to do. Well, God did not see fit to give the mules the inclination to climb. And in order to get them on and off the boat, they had to cross a horseboard and climb a ramp down into the stable. So they sometimes needed a little convincing. A Hoggee would get at the snout, and another would get behind and take him by the tail and give him a push. Like I said, it was dangerous work, and you could get mule kicked pretty quick. I only prayed that there'd come a time when I might have the skill and the trust of the crew to be able to do that on my own. I do remember the first time I got to drive the mules by myself. I was 10, and I thought I'd be following Finn like I always did, helping him and walking along and running behind him on the path. I had just helped him to harness the mules when he turns to me with this queer look on his face, holding out the driving stick like he was holding a scepter for a king. "They're all yours, lass," he said. Well, my knees shook, and I reckon I turned a shade of green as he said, "Don't worry now, we'll have eyes on you." Well, that was what I was worried about. I told you I'd tripped just coming onto a stage. I did not want to embarrass myself in front of the crew. I was trying to win their respect after all. But I took the stick, and he climbed back on board, and I waited for the signal. And then, just like I always learned, I flicked the switch over the mules' heads and said, "Get up, mules!" And I was right. With the first step they took, they tried to pull me off my feet, wee 10-year-old that I was. But I stood my ground, and I kept my footing. I held my head high. Aileen McGuire, Hoggee on the Mary Rose, Irish and proud, and I never did take shame in it. Now, when I joined the crew in 1860, the canal was already decades old. As I said, it was opened in 1825, though none on my crew had ever seen that. Sean and Finn come the closest. My grandfather come over in 1865, the time of the Great Hunger, the potato famine, as some called it, when many of my countrymen died of starvation. But he was no stranger to the water. My grandfather had served in Her Majesty's Royal Navy on the Ivory Coast, saving slaves from illegal slave ships in South Africa. I was proud of him for that. And because of his skills and his courage, he found work easy enough in a boatyard. 3 years later, he bought his own boat. And in 1850, he sent for me da. Well, my father come over, and he decided that working on the canal was not really for him, and he took work mining salt, leaving my grandfather without a crew. Finn and Sean, they come over in 1827, 2 years after the canal opened. They took work for passage and lied about their ages. 12 and 13 years old they was, digging on the canal, which they called the ditch. They was helping to build bridges and aqueducts and plug up the holes when the canal leaked. Did you know a canal could leak? It did. And sometimes it flooded the countryside. Well, I think it was in Lyons, they found that they could make cement from the lime. And they could use that under the water, and it plugged up the cracks and it held. They was working, Sean and Finn, for 50 cents a day. I'm glad today we're making laws to protect women and children from such labor. But in those days, there was nothing. My grandfather met them in a tavern, and he liked the looks of them, and he found them to be hard working. And that's how the crew of the Mary Rose was formed. My grandfather says that the canal is a modern miracle. All, he said, had changed the face of New York State and the country. It was a time of industry and westward expansion. And all those little towns and cities along the way, they grew up around the canal because of the canal. We were expanding the country, bringing goods from the Hudson all the way to the Great Lakes and beyond. My people building this country. And people, we brought people too. They were settlers, and they settled along the way, and some went westward. Immigrants from all around the world, and they brought their skills and their craftsmen and their hard work to help build this country. And Buffalo became the wheat capital of the entire world. Can you imagine? The wheat capital of the whole world. All because of that waterway. But after a while, the mules gave way to horses, and horses gave way to steam. And then the railroads come. You see, the canal, when they built it, was faster and safer than overland travel. But the railroads could go faster and farther. And I imagine it's only a matter of time before the canal is just a memory. But for me, it's a fond one. Those lazy, slow towpath days, daydreaming my life away. I met so many people, good and bad. I had experiences, I saw so many sights and adventures. All the adventures I had. And I'm writing them in my book. If you don't mind, I'd like to share one with you. It's from 1862 in June, when I saved summer. But I have to read it. I'll partially read it. It was just 3 months before my 12th birthday, you see. Hoggee! That long, drawn-out call. It meant I weren't in trouble. It was Sean calling me in for breakfast. I looked at the sky the way Finn taught me, and I could tell it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, already 4 hours into my shift. No wonder my stomach was grumbling. Hoggee! I'm coming, Sean! Keep your shirt on. I wasn't being rude. It seems that way, but it was a game we played. He called, and I stalled, and I reckoned it kept us from getting bored. The towpath at that point was smooth and straight. There were no boats in front of us and none behind. So because of that, I could let the mules walk themselves for a short time. Finn moved the boat closer to the wall along that part of the canal, and I climbed on board. I told Summer, you keep Autumn beside you, do a good job, and there'll be extra food for you tonight, as he was a smart mule. Well, his ears twitched, so I knew he understood me just fine. Grandfather was already in the galley, sitting in the bench with his legs stretched out, sopping up his toast and some egg yolk. And I slid into the bench seat across from him. Sean spooned some gruel into my bowl and slid a couple of eggs onto my plate. I was so hungry. I hunched over my breakfast and I began to shovel it in my mouth like a hungry wolf. That I was. Aileen McGuire. When my grandfather uses both of my names, it's not good. I find myself wishing your sainted mother was here, but if she saw your animalistic ways, she'd be none too happy with me. I'm trying to raise you right. You need manners, girl. Well, you are raising me right, I said, with my mouth full. Manners, I said, and so I swallowed. I'm just as hungry as the carmen, I told him. And Sean said, well, if you don't want to attack us like that sorceress, you better slow down. The carmen was a terrible witch back home. Well, I washed down the rest of my breakfast with some watered ale. I can't leave the mules for long, and they knew it was true, so off I went almost as fast as I got there. Now my crew, we think that the mules are better than horses for towing the boat. They're sure-footed, they can't mate, and they don't eat much. Summer is a cut above the rest. My grandfather spent a little extra money, but he's worth it as he's smart and he keeps Autumn in line. And Autumn, well, she's a good old girl, but she has selective hearing. Now I brag on my mules, but what did I find when I come back to the towpath? But the two of them had stopped walking and was standing under a shade tree to eat the sweetgrass at their feet. And there I saw our boat passing us by. I got a mighty bad scowl from Finn, who blew on the horn. Ah, you things, I said. Here I am bragging on you and you let me down. You don't know how to work for your food. Come on, get up, y'all. And so I cracked my stick over their heads, and they started a lazy walk. And soon our tow rope went taut again, and the boat was under power. It's without the mules, it has no power. God forbid, I don't know what would have happened if the mules didn't move. Well, we come to a narrows after a while. It's this place in the canal that's barely wide enough for two boats to pass each other. It was a real problem. We had a lot of jams in the canal where you couldn't get through because all the boats were blocking it. Well, we come to a narrows without any other boats, and I pulled back a little bit to talk it to Finn, who was at the tiller. Do you know where we are? He looked down the way and looked at the sky and looked at his wrist, looked at his hand, and he says, yeah, about 5 miles outside Rome. I don't know how he does that, but he could do it. 5 miles outside Rome. We'll be there in a couple of hours, he said. He pointed up ahead as we was coming to a bridge, a low bridge. Now, do you know that when they built the canal, without really so much as a if you please, they cut some of the farms right in two, and the farmers couldn't get to their land. So they had to build these bridges. That's why there were so many, so the farmers and the people living nearby could cross over. He says, you're going to jump it, lass? See, I found out what my grandfather meant by jumping the bridge. I watched the canalers. It's a game they play. They run along the deck of their boat. They get up onto the bridge. They run across the bridge, and when their boat comes back under the other side, they drop down on deck. I got the skills. I could do it. I got the courage. But right then I felt my grandfather's eyes boring a hole through the back of my head. No, I don't think so, not this time, I said. Make way, came a voice from behind me, and I turned just in time to see a packet boat gaining on us with no intention of slowing. "Slow down," I said, and I said, "Ho up, autumn, ho up, summer." I stopped my team, but he kept coming. Packet boats, the fool lot of them. They're not supposed to go any faster than we do, but they do have the right of way. And their teamster was cracking a whip over the head of 2 fine white horses, all decked out in silks and plumes, trying to impress his wealthy customers. I said, "Slow down, you fool," but he kept coming. His rope went taut 2 feet off the ground, and I had no desire to get tangled in it. So I moved my team to the outside and let my rope go slack so he could pass us by. Finn, seeing my trouble, blew the horn, and I blushed when he gave the man a 1-fingered salute. Well, the whole thing became a mighty entertaining as they neared the low bridge, and their steersman called out, "Low bridge, coming to a low bridge." And all those fancy ladies sitting up on the cabin roof, taking the air with their parasols, dropped down in unison like a shooting match. Boom, 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 they went. I laughed until my side ached. But it was even better when one man who stayed standing on a dare came within a whisker of the boat before he ducked, and his beaverskin top hat flew off his head into the water. "Don't get vexed, mister," I shouted. "It'll look mighty fine on a catfish." Everybody on his boat was laughing, I was laughing, everyone was he was a fool. His crewman was trying to fish the hat out with a boat hook, and they couldn't get it. And we all watched as the topper took on water and sank to the bottom. He threw his hands up in the air and disappeared inside the cabin, red as a beet. Well, it turns out that the packet boat was the most entertaining and most highlighted part of the day. As we come closer to Rome, which is our usual turnaround spot. Now, I should tell you, first of all, we left 2 weeks before, and we took on a load of lumber from Tonawanda and some dry goods. And our boat is shorter than many, and it has little freeboard, which is the space between the water and the deck. So we was sitting pretty low in the water all the time. Well, when we left Buffalo, there was a dockman who just laughed and pointed at us and said, "I'll give you 50 cents for her. You'll never make it all the way loaded like that." I just ignored him because our crew is good and experienced. Well, we was coming to Rome, which was our usual turnaround spot. Many canalers would continue all the way to the Hudson, but we never did. We would take on a load in Rome and turn around and head home, as they had a wide water there, so that boats could make that turnaround. The closer we got, the more farms and homes dotted the landscape, and people were out walking on the path, taking the sun. They waved. People on the canal are mostly very nice. And they waved and shouted afternoon as they tipped their hats. But most paid me no attention, not to another boy driving his mules. And if they knew I was a girl, they never said so. Well, when we come into Rome, there was already several boats there in dockage. There was a man standing with suspenders in his long johns up on his boat, and he waved and shouted, "Micheline," to my grandfather, and my grandfather said, "Belcher." His boat was named the Belcher after himself. He was Sam Belcher, and I couldn't help but always laugh at that name. I mean, the poor man to be named Belcher and to have a boat named the Belcher. Oh, I'm sure he took a lot of ribbon for it, and he took ribbon from me as well, but Sam was a good man. Grandfather says, pull in behind that one, and so we pulled right up beside the belcher. After we tied up and took care of our mules, which meant hobbling 2 on the shore and putting 2 in the stable for the night, switching them off for the morning, Grandfather and Finn and Sam took off into town to find supplies. But I knew that was just code they was going to the tavern. I was finishing up in the galley when Sean comes in and says, the Belcher invited us for supper. Now, I doubt it had very much to do with the fact that they wanted us around, and a whole lot more to do with the fact that Sean was a better cook than theirs. Mm-hmm. And I took a great deal of pleasure in watching the 2 men exchanging recipes like a couple of women. And I smiled to myself when Sean gave their Belcher's cook his favorite recipe without telling him the secret ingredient. I'll take that secret to my grave. I will. Sean made me promise. After we ate supper, the men retired to the deck to have their pipes. And their Hoggies, Tony and Pete, they're just a little older than me, and I knew them well enough from other trips this way. They invited me below decks to play cards. They're cunning foxes, they are. So I guarded my matchsticks very well, but I beat 'em at every hand, because I play with Finn and Sean. We had just finished playing the last hand. Well, they wanted to play another one when Tony says, they're always trying to trick me, they are, is your guardian gonna mind that you're down here playing games with us? I said, why should he? I'm my own person. I have a mind of my own, don't I? And then I turned out my pockets and said, and just so you know, if you think you're going to take me for any money, I don't get wages like the 2 of you. I'm working for my keep and for family. And then Pete says, it's not what I hear tell. Yeah, well, what did you hear? I says. I heard that your grandfather is keeping your pay aside to marry you off. You louts, I said. You lousy louts. My grandfather wouldn't do that. No, I'm not getting wages. It's not what I heard, said Tony and Pete, and I saw them wink at each other. Well, that ended our evening of fun, I'll tell you that. I scooped up my matchsticks, which was all of them, and I said, and just so you know, I'm leaving 1 match here, so that when your crew goes to light their pipes, you'll have something to light it with. And I turned on my tail and I, wait a minute, said Tony. Tony, please. They called me Alan. So they tried to keep my secret. They knew I was a girl. You're the only girl, Hoggee, we know, they said. We're just funning with you. Come on back and have a sit. Have a drink with us. And they pushed a cup across the table. What's in it? I said. Well, it ain't canal water, said Pete. I took a sniff. It smelled worse than turpentine. How can you drink that awful? I said. Oh, go on, they said. You haven't had any yet. So I took a sip. It tasted pretty good. I drank the whole thing in one gulp. My gut was on fire. I spit it out on the hull of the boat, and I said, "What was that?" "Oh, just a wee dram of whiskey." "What?" I had to leave. So I fumed out of the galley. I fumed out of the boat. And when I got topside, I have no idea how long I was below, but there wasn't a soul around. All the men had gone off to bed, including Sean had left me there. Now I had to go back to my boat and sneak aboard with whiskey on my breath. When I got to my boat, it was dark, which meant they was all abed. So I took off my brogans and I tiptoed onto the deck. Below deck, down the stairs. To get to my berth, I had to pass my grandfather's. I was almost past his door when I heard him clear his throat. "Aileen!" I stiffened and hid the shoes behind my back. He came to the door. He was up doing the books. "Why are you out of bed so late at night, lass?" And he looked me over, and I was wearing my clothes. He said, "Why are you coming on the boat so late? What you doing, lass?" I didn't know what to say, but I didn't want to open my mouth because he'd smell the whiskey. I said, "I was playing cards with the fellas, godfather. It was nothing really." "You were playing cards with the fellas. And where was Sean? I thought you were asleep. I saw him come in." Grandfather was furious. He gave me the what talking for. He says, "Aileen, I promised your mother I'd raise you, and I do it right. I'm doing the best I can. I never had a girl child to raise. Your ma was so little when I left. It's not right for a lady to be below decks with the boys. It's just a good reason why I should leave you behind." Leave me? Did he really say he was going to leave me? I said, "Grandfather, you can't leave me." He said, "Not here, lass. When we get back to Buffalo." "Oh, you can't, Grandfather. I'm crew, I'm family. You can't." "Granddaughter, that's the end of it. Get yourself off to bed now." "What's the matter with your lips?" he said. You can't lie to my grandfather. I looked him in the eye and I said, "Oh, the fellas just gave me a wee dram of whiskey." Well, that was the end of that, and the end of me. I was sure I was going to be left behind in Buffalo, never to see the canal again. And I couldn't sleep all night. I got ahead of myself. I think I'm almost there. I was shaken awake the next morning by Finn. "Hoggee, up and at 'em. We're taking a load of the O'Reilly's china, as O'Reilly's boat is being repaired, and we made a deal that we'll share the profits, but there's a storm coming and we have to be underway, so up with you." Well, my head hurt from not sleeping much, but I got up. I got dressed. Sean tried to feed me, but my stomach was queasy. Not from the whiskey. I didn't have enough of that. But it was from thinking that Grandfather was going to put me off in Buffalo. It made me sick. And so I gave what Sean fed me to some ducks looking for handouts. And I looked over and I seen Grandfather on the Belcher talking with Tony and Pete. And they was looking my way. I hid my face. I couldn't meet them in the eye. Well, we got ourselves ready. We took on Riley's load. And then when we were ready, some friendly canalers who were staying over, they gave our boat a little shove off. Tony and Pete shouts, "See you next time, Alan." Still keeping my secret they were. But I doubted I'd have a next time, and I just didn't reply. When we rose that morning and Finn told me that a storm was coming, it's true. The skies were black with clouds. And I knew that if we didn't get underway soon, we wouldn't make it to our first stop along the way, which was Syracuse on our way back. A light drizzle had begun. So before I took to the path, I had taken a rain slicker and the canaler's friend, which was a knife Finn gave me on my 11th birthday. Did I tell you that, my hair when I cut it, and my grandfather was so angry? Years after, when he died, I found a box beneath the bed, a box of treasure, and in it was my hair. A frayed blue ribbon that I bought with my own wages when I took an interest in a boy, and the canaler's friend, the knife that Finn gave me. So I tucked that knife into my slicker that morning. We got no more than an hour outside Rome when the light spring rain became a cloudburst, and the sky opened. The winds picked up. And I'm going to read this. My teeth chattered when the morning became chill, and all I wanted was to get dry and warm again. I set my icy fingers on Summer's side to share his warmth, and he gave me a wide-eyed snort. "I'm sure sorry," I told the two of them, "that you have to be out here on a day like this. But the truth is, I didn't mind being out in the rain. It matched my mood completely. I stomped in every puddle I come to. I kicked every rock on the path, but I felt sorry for the mules. I promise you'll be warm later. And isn't it better that we're together?" I said. Silence from the mules. "Oh, you'll be all dry and warm." Autumn shook her mane, and my already wet slicker got wet again. "Now, was that necessary?" I said. She raised her tail and relieved herself in front of me. That's when the air shifted. The wind danced around me, forcing me back where I had started. It skimmed the water's surface and sent ripples that formed sprays splashing at the shoreline. Now, if you've never been out in a boat in a storm on the water, especially even on the Erie Canal, I have been. And it's like this. Ripples of water splashing the shore. The mules moved at an even pace, but they pushed hard against the storm. And I glanced over at our boat for advice. I was just 11. But they had their hands full. It was taking 2 men to hold the tiller. And Sean was there with a long pole trying to push us off the shore if we got too close. The gusts came at us from the west, enjoying the natural downhill current on its way to the Hudson, so that every step we pushed forward, our freighter paced back, and the tow line as taut as it would go. I raised my head at a rumble in the distance. The path trembled beneath our feet, and the patter of rain let loose in a torrent. Summer, brave and steadfast, leaned into the harness at my urging, and Autumn flung her head about, wide-eyed bugging, and screamed. Afraid that she would buck, I moved back. "Hoggee!" Finn called through the storm. "Your grandfather says keep an eye out." Wiping water from my eyes, I searched along the flattened reeds at the steep embankment. How many times had we traveled this way? And only now I realized there were no escape holes like there were in the rock cut at Lockport. You know about the escape holes? There were holes in the path covered over with a board, so that if someone, like a mule, were to fall into the water, you could put that board down in the hole and coax them up to safety. But those were few and far between, and they weren't everywhere. And where we were, there were none. It was just embankment. The familiar clomp of shod hooves, muted on the sodden path, and the air crackled, making the hairs on my arms stiffen. The blackened sky let loose a cloudburst, and the path in front of me flooded. A sudden gully washer of slimy mud from a feeder stream gouged a swath and blocked our way. My team sidestepped around it, pulling the reins from my hands. And Autumn lost her footing. She slid onto her flank, taking Summer down with her. I grabbed for the lead, but their weight forced it from my hands again. I fought to stay upright and backed up to more solid ground, crying out as they slithered down the grass into the canal. I looked again for help from the crew, but Finn was struggling at the tiller alone, and Grandfather and Sean were pulling in the tow line, trying to get the mules closer. Instead, the mules bobbed and kicked, becoming more tangled in the gear, and slid and glided farther away. Helpless, I choked on the rein and thrust my hand beneath my slicker for the canaler's friend. Happy I had taken it. My only friend in the moment. Grandfather and I locked eyes. He said something, but over the bawling wind I couldn't hear what it was. I threw my coat aside, raced over the towpath with my knife between my teeth. Scanning, I found the animals where they swirled in an eddy. I could reach them. I could. I knew I could. I had to. I gathered my strength and dove in. The current drove me back, and I thrust out and kicked off the bank. But each time I moved forward, I got swirled in a watery waltz. Rest and control, I propelled and splashed until the leather securing their harness brushed against my hand and into my grasp. A strap, softened by the rain, sliced through with the sharp knife. It fell away and the gear fell slack. No longer tethered together, the mules swam free. I reached for Autumn's tail when it broke the surface. "Come on, girl, come on, let me get you." The thunder boomed, and she turned away from me. I had to let her go. Summer was closer. Tormenting rain and wind swirled the waters, adding to his fear. He stopped swimming, and I paddled to him, close enough to wrap my fingers into his tail. I gagged on a mouthful of muddy water, and looped a leg over his back. He quivered at my touch. "Don't fight me, boy, let me get on." He kicked under and brayed for help. I coughed and sputtered and reached to fist his mane, to pull myself up with my face to his ear. His every muscle moved. "Relax now. Easy," I whispered. "Togo buggy. Take it easy." Then, as quickly as it had begun, the deluge ceased. But the damage was done. In that quiet, Summer and I were alone. The boat had drifted sideways in the canal and out of view. Autumn was gone, though I hoped she would find a place to climb out. I dug my heels into Summer's side, prodding him toward the shore, but floating debris, torn from the forest and flooded homes, edged us further away from help. At last he tired from struggling and settled into floating. Logs and broken tree limbs brushed against us. I kicked them off, my boy staying calm through it all. "Now, old lad, if we get through this, they'll come for us soon." I lied to us both. If not too ruined, the Mary Rose would never be able to locate a place to hitch the second team, turn around, and get back to us on time. We'd meet with them, swimming or floating on our backs. Numbness from the cold sent shivers from my head to my feet. I buried my face in Summer's mane, hoping to find warmth. Exhaustion set in, and I struggled to keep my eyes open. "Stay awake, Aileen," the voice in my head said. "We can't be asleep, or we'll miss help when it comes." And then the other voice, "You know, they dredge the canal now and then, and they find dead mules and sometimes men." My head drooped and I swallowed water, waking to a fitting cough. Summer continued his slow rhythmic kick to bring us closer to the shore. We got very close to a black alder stump. The black alder reaches down into the water with its roots, and I managed to walk my fingers across the shore to grab into the roots. The village was in view, but after the storm, no one was out, except a boat moving toward us. It was the Belcher. I shouted, "Help!" I waved my free arm, "We're over here." The driver pointed and called, "Someone's in the water by that tree." From the freighter, a crewman answered, "I see them right there." "It's Aileen," Sam Belcher shouted, and in a deep voice he said, "Fetch a blanket." Tony, who was driving, found a foothold to reach us, and I stretched out my hand to him. At the same moment, a boathook swung out from the vessel. He grabbed the remnants of Summer's halter, and the crewman lifted me on board. From the deck I watched as my bedraggled mule was coaxed and tugged, struggling up to level ground. "Where's the Mary Rose gal?" Belcher asked. "I don't know. I lost sight of him." "Well, don't trouble over your mule now. We'll take care of him. Let's go find your grandfather. I was too weary to argue about leaving my mule behind. They quilted him, and Sam shepherded me below decks, where they had a warm blanket and a bucket of hot water ready. They refused to let me go and help. At least tell me what they're doing, I said. Are they all right? As he went to step outside, Pete pushed past him. Did they find them? Are they all right? He told me they're wedged. Now, the first canal in 1825 was about 40 feet wide. Not much wider than this room. About the same length as a boat. And when they put in the one in 1865, it was 60 feet wide. Our boat was a 60-foot boat. And they had turned sideways and become wedged across the width of the canal. It's not a good situation to be in. But they managed. The crew of the Belcher managed with a winch and pulleys to help the boat off. I guess I fell asleep. I was so weary. But I woke at the sound of my grandfather's voice on deck. And I went running. There's no force on this earth that can hold an Irishman down when he or she has a mind to do something. Aileen McGuire, grandfather said, I swear, if you give me such a fright again, I'll... What was you thinking, girl? Oh, by God, I'm just so glad to have you back. And he put me in a hug that I never wanted to end. And at last, we made our way back to our boat. But I was dejected. I'm so sorry, grandfather. I lost Autumn. She's gone. But I saved Summer. Did you hear that, Mickeleen? As my grandfather was in a quiet mood and a brooding mood, and it worried me a bit, but Finn stepped in and said, did you hear that? Your mule is just fine. I heard, grandfather said. And this is one more reason she should be staying in Buffalo. It wasn't the first time I heard it, and it would not be the last. My mouth opened in protest, but Finn spoke up first. You're a decent man, Mickeleen, Captain, sir. But you're a fool. No hired boy would have done what this girl did. She saved your finest mule. She's worth the wages of 6, and yet you pay her nothing. And now, Sean joined the conversation, I've been helping her to read. She can practice her numbers if you let her help with the bookkeeping. And when we come back to Buffalo, not a student in the academy will know as much as she does, because you know as well as I do, sir, learning comes from more than school. Aye, said Finn, we're her family, and we should have a say what happens. Ah, right, the lot of you, said grandfather. Leave me be on it, leave me be. At that moment, he was just glad to have me back. And it wasn't the warm whiskey that was burning in my throat. That night, we tied up on the shore to share a supper of thick stew. The scent of carrots and meat and onions and potatoes mixed with the smell of canal water and the wooden hull of the Mary Rose. I closed my eyes. And I drank in that smell to keep for the time when I wouldn't be on the boat. We shared the stories of our day. They told us how they saw Autumn for a moment, and they hadn't been wedged, they could have helped her. A sigh rose out of me. I know you would have saved her, I said. And Finn put a hand on my shoulder. You are a brave lass, and a fearless soul, said Sean. Why, it's almost as if that animal come back on his own, Finn said. When me and Tony went to town for him, we run into Belcher's man being led by a mule. Well, not you mean leading a mule. No, I mean Summer was leading him. He was a good old boy, and we all laughed at it. And then I raised my cup. To Autumn. Hear, hear, they said. And we drank to our lost and our fallen. 'Tis a shame. She was a good old gal. We did some work on our boat. It was dirty. It had to be cleaned and repainted, and my mother's name on the name board had to be repainted. And I'm spending as much time as I can with Summer now. We're going to have to find another mule to be his partner. We can't put him back to work until we do. And although the storm cost us 2 days' travel, we delivered Riley's cargo of china in Rochester, and he split the money with us as promised. Grandfather even took the fellow's words to heart and gave me back wages and promised to pay me $10 a month. You know, I said to Grandfather, the Belchers Hoggees said you were saving my back pay to marry me off. Did they now? He said, and rolled his eyes. Don't believe everything you hear, lass. I'll be keeping some of your earnings, not to marry you off, but so you can have a choice in this life of what you want to do. Most of us never had that, but you will. And I read all the books we have, I said. I can read them again. I was thinking I might read them backwards and upside down next. He cleared his throat and smiled and shook his head. Aileen McGuire, you are Irish through and through. You'll do no such thing. You don't be beaten around the bush now. You'll have a new set of books when we get back to Buffalo, because you'll need them the next time out. It's true. He didn't leave me behind. But he did say some malarkey about having so much trouble breaking in a green hand. Now, when the crew calls, Hoggee, I come a-running, not just for the work, but for Sean's breakfast. And that's the story of saving Summer. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you again for inviting me here to share my story. I know my grandfather would be proud if he was still among us. And I hope to share my other stories with you someday too. Do you have any questions? That was about all you could take, eh? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for taking us down the Erie Canal. Thank you everybody for coming. just a quick little PSA of upcoming things. On Thursday, we've got 2 events. Java with Joe will be at the Richmond Memorial Library at 9:30. Claudia Newstein from the Genesee County Parks and Forests will be there talking about watersheds of Genesee County. And then Thursday evening, we're right back here for a concert solo show by Rich Conroy. You won't want to miss that. It'll be a lot of fun at 7 o'clock. And then our Murder Mystery Dinner Theater, there's still tickets available for September 12th. We'll be over at Eli Fish for the Batavia Beer Bath Murder. So tickets are $50. And you can go online to our website and find the link to the tickets there if you want to do that. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, thank you.